Hello, I'm Helen Bradley. Welcome to this video tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can create a doodle style heart in Illustrator. Before we get started in Illustrator, let's have a look and see what it is that we're trying to achieve. This is what we're going to create. We're going to draw our own heart shape and we're going to build it up with a series of appearances, some brushes and some built-in patterns. So you're going to end up with something that looks a little bit like this, and along the way you're going to learn a lot of Illustrator skills. I've started here with a brand new document. Mine's 1000 by 1000 points in size, but yours could be any size you like. I'm going to set no fill color. I'm going to set a stroke color of black, and I'm going to target the pen tool, and this is really pretty much the hardest part of the pen work that we're going to do, and it's pretty easy even at that. So I'm going to click and drag upwards to start my pen line, and then over here I'm going to make the top of my letter M by clicking and dragging downwards at this point. Now right now my handle is off in this direction. I really want this one to be up here, so I'm going to switch now to the direct selection tool, and I'm going to hover over this handle, and I'm going to hold the Alt key so that I get that little plus symbol, and I'm just going to move it up. So that's telling me that I'm now taking off in the other direction. I'm going to reselect my pen tool, click on this anchor, draw upwards, and then click down here to continue with my letter M, and I'm just going to finish off here. So now I have a closed shape. I've just got a bit of a problem happening here, so I'm going back to my direct selection tool. I'm just going to drag upwards on this handle because I want a sort of flat bottom for this shape. And now I can just reshape it to suit, and it doesn't really matter what we get here because what we're looking for is something that is a little bit organic, so it doesn't have to be perfect, and in fact will look a whole lot better if it is not perfect. So now that I've got my starting M shape, this is going to be my middle piece, so I'm just going to hold the Shift key as I scale it down a bit in size, and probably just bring this anchor point down a little bit too. Okay, so let's call that good for the starting shape. I'm going to select it, and now I'm going to choose Object, Transform, Scale, and I'm going to make it bigger. Now I'm going to ignore what's happening here because this is some preset options from last time I was in here. So I want to scale it, and I want to scale it in a uniform direction, so I'm going to scale it up probably about, I'm going to test this, we'll test 125%. That's pretty good. But I want my original as well, so I'm going to click copy. So that gives me my original and an upscaled version. I'm going to do that twice more. Object, Transform, Scale. You can see 125 is still in there from last time. Click copy, so that gives me 3, and let's go and do that again and click copy. So now I've got 4 versions of my shape. The problem is that I want the bottoms all aligned, not the tops, so I'm going to select over the shapes with the direct selection tool, and now I'm going to align all their bases, vertically align their bottoms, and it seems like I've got them all aligning to the artboard right now, but that's okay because I can just drag them up. Now let's have a look at these individual shapes. This middle one I want to fill with black, so I'm just going to switch the foreground and background color for that shape. And now this one, I want the stroke line to be a bit thicker, so I'm just going to select it and increase the stroke. I'm going to do that on this one too. And now I'm going to focus on this outer edge because this is the one where I want some more interesting effects to be applied. Now for this outside edge here, we're actually going to create a pattern to apply to that edge. So I'm going to select the ellipse tool, and making sure I still just have a stroke color and no fill, I'm going to drag out a circle, and I do that by holding the Shift key as I drag with the ellipse. I'm going to just increase the stroke weight on this circle to say 3 points. And now I want a few more, so I'm going to choose Effect, Distort and Transform, Transform. I'm going to turn on Preview, and 6 copies is probably going to be plenty, so I'm just going to type 6 in here. And I want to move them in a horizontal direction. Now, you might strike disaster later on if you don't move these out in a horizontal direction, because we actually want them to be like this. So once they're sort of touching and you're happy with that sort of shape, just click OK. And still with this shape selected, I'm going to choose Object, Expand Appearance. That just breaks it up into its component circles. Now this is going to be a pattern brush, so I'm going to have to open my brushes panel. So I'm going to choose Window and then Brushes, and I'm going to click on the selection tool. I'm going to just drag and drop, well, pick up and drag and drop this shape into the brushes panel here, and it's going to be a pattern brush. So I'm going to select that and click OK. And now we get to set up our pattern brush, and what we're concerned about is that we've got a way of it bending around this shape. Now right now there's nothing on the inside, so I'm just going to click here and see if we can't find something that would be nice for the inside, and I think I'm just going to choose Auto Sliced. But you're just looking for something that's going to look okay if it is bent around the middle, or you could also use Auto Centered. Either of those would be fine. If you want to be able to use this brush in color later on, just select Tints here. I don't need to, but I'm going to do Tints anyway and click OK. And now we can just move this shape out of the way because we don't totally need it unless we need to make alterations. I'm going to select this shape, but I only want the dots to be around the M shape and not across the bottom, so I'm going to break this apart. I'm going to select the scissors tool, which shares a toolbar position with the eraser, and then I'm just going to click on these anchor points, this one here and this one here. And what that does is it breaks this shape apart into the M and into this bottom bar, and so I can select the bottom bar and just delete it because I don't want it any longer. I'm going to put my shape sort of back into position so I can see how it's working. I'm just going to click on my pattern brush, and that applies the pattern brush to my shape. Now if it needs a little bit of alteration, we can do that. I can click here to choose the options for the selected object, and that allows me to make some changes to how this brush is scaled, so I can make it a bit bigger or a bit smaller if I want to. I'm going to make mine just a little bit smaller. You can add space to fit, you can stretch to fit, and you can approximate the path, so you can decide what looks better in terms of having the dots placed on your shape. So I'm just going to click OK once I get something I kind of like. Now I could increase the point size if I wanted to. It defaulted to 1 point, but I could, for example, make it 1.25 points if I wanted a slightly thicker line. The other thing I can do is to come in here and make some changes to the shape itself. Click the direct selection tool, click on an anchor point, and then just move the anchor point but not move the rest of the shape. So this will allow me to finesse my shape. Now here I just want to bring the ends in a little bit. And I'm also going to add an outside edge here, so I'm just going to go back to selecting this M shape, and let's go and grab the Appearance panel. The Appearance panel you can get to by choosing Window and Appearance. One of the benefits of the Appearance panel is that it would allow us to add yet another stroke to this M shape. So I'm going to click here and add a new stroke. And I'm going to make it a heavier stroke. You can see how it's starting to appear here. It's a much heavier stroke, but right now it's in the middle of my circles. Well, I want it to be outside the circles. So with this stroke selected, I'm going to choose Effect and then Path and then Offset Path. I'm going to click to preview it so we can see what's happening, and I'm going to start to decrease this value or increase it. Whatever I do is going to affect how this stroke appears around my dots. Now I'm actually just eyeballing this, and actually a 15-point offset is going to be exactly what I want here. It's going to give me a stroke line that is around and encompassing my dots. So I'm going to select that option and just click OK. I just think that my stroke weight is a little bit too heavy, so I'm going to bring it down to 3 points. So we've actually created a really complex appearance for this shape. And now just before I finish up, I'm going to grab this direct selection tool again, and I'm just going to move this shape in here so it just aligns with the bottom of the rest of the shape and it just tucks in nicely. So this is the pattern that I'm going to use here that's going to go all the way around the outside of my heart. So I'm going to select over it. Well, I'm going to do that with the selection tool, and I'm going to choose object group so that this is now going to move as a single object. And now what I want to do is to make it into a pattern brush. So with it selected, I'm going to drag and drop it into this brushes panel here, and I'm going to select for it to be a pattern brush and click OK. So you can see that we've got a pattern brush that's in part going to be created by another brush that we created. Now we're going to be interested in these two settings, the one that is going to be bent around the inside of the shape and the outside, because this is going to be the point on the heart. So I'm just going to click here and see if there's something that I would like better as being the shape that's going to be used for the point of the heart. In fact, I like what the option is here, so I'm going to choose that. And here I'm just going to see if there's something that would look good here. I think I'm going to choose auto sliced for that as well. I'm just looking for something that's going to be an attractive pattern that I can use. Again, if I want to be able to recolor it later on easily, I would make it tints and just click OK. So now this shape has been made into a pattern brush that we can use. So I'm just going to move it out of the way. So let's get started with our heart shape, and we're going to do that using the pen tool, but it's very, very easy. So first of all, I'm going to click here and drag upwards to create the top of my heart. In fact, I'm actually going to drag out a little bit at this angle. And then down here, I'm just going to click and drag in this direction. So I'm going to go click, drag, and that's all I need for my heart shape. So I'm going to go back and choose my direct selection tool. I'm going to press Ctrl-0 just to bring everything back where I can see it. Now with this direct selection tool, I can now start to reshape my heart. And I just want to get a nice sort of shape to my heart, and I also want to just check and make sure that this anchor is positioned immediately under the other anchor. Now this is half a heart, so I'm going to make a whole heart by selecting this shape and choose Edit, Copy, Edit, Paste in Place. And then I'm going to flip it. So I'm going to, with the shape still selected, I'm going to choose Object, Transform, Reflect. And I'm just going to reflect this over the vertical and click OK. And that gives me two of my shapes, but they're both pointing in different directions. So now I can just move this top shape over so that it intersects with the second shape. I'm going to again select my direct selection tool. I'm going to select over these 2 points here and choose Object, Path, Average, and click OK. That makes sure that these 2 points are directly over the top of each other. Now when I choose Object, Path, Join, they'll be joined to make 1 point. I'm going to do the same here. Select over both these, Object, Path, Average, OK, and then Object, Path, Join. And now I have a heart shape that is made up of just these 2 anchor points. And I can reshape that if I wish. So you could make it an off-center heart if you wanted to. I'm just going to make mine a regular shape, but I might make it a little bit bigger. Now before I go to the step of actually putting my pattern on this, I'm going to make a duplicate of this. So I'm going to choose Object, Transform, Scale, because I want a second heart shape, but I want it to be smaller this time. So instead of uniform 125, I'm going to make this about 85%. So it's going to be smaller than the original heart, but I want my original heart as well, so I'm going to click Copy. So this just gives me 2 hearts, so that I've got my second one already there for when I need it. But I'm going to select the outside one because I'm going to apply this pattern brush to it. So with it selected, I'm just going to click on my brush. And obviously what we hoped would happen didn't quite happen, but that's okay because it's really easy to make changes to it. We're just going to click here for options of selected object. Well, to start off with, you can see that my pattern's gone inside my shape and I want it to be outside. So I'm going to click flip across and now it's on the outside. And I want it to be much, much smaller. So I'm going to start sizing it down till it becomes the size that I want it for my shape. And you can see that we're getting these little bendy bits here, that we're getting interesting effects in the corners. Now I may want to add a bit of space to make it fit, or I might want to approximate the path, whatever is going to give me the better result. And I can fiddle here with the exact percentage to see exactly what I'm going to get, but I will need to move out of this dialog between changes to the percentage, because otherwise I'm not going to see exactly the change that I'm going to get with these different values. And again, I can try approximate path, add space, or stretch to fit to get the best result. I'm going to just select OK and call this good. So we have a stroke around this shape, which is the pattern brush, but I'd also like to have a darker line as well. So I'm going to add another stroke to this path. I'm going to click here and choose add new stroke. Now I do that because that just adds a very simple black line, single pixel stroke or single point stroke. You can see it as I'm enlarging this and making it thicker that it's actually going on top of the pattern. Now I would like it to be inside this line, so I'm just going to make it about the width that I want, and I think probably about 4 points is fine, but I need to bring it in. So I'm going to, with it selected, choose Effect, Path, Offset Path. And I'm going to click on Preview and I'm going to start bringing in this value. So I want it to be a negative value and I just want it to be offset so it sits just inside that line. And when it's in position, I'll just click OK. And so here's the first part of my heart, and we're ready to go ahead and do some of the inner parts of it. Now we went ahead earlier and created this other heart shape. It's a duplicate, but you can see that already it's starting to not be exactly the shape that I want. So all I need to do is to click on the direct selection tool and just come in here and pick up this heart shape and just make it what I want. And I want this to look a little bit organic, so I don't want it to be a exact copy. I want it to be sort of just a little bit more organic, a little bit rougher shape. So I've now got this shape that I want to use, so I'm going to duplicate it because I'm going to need it again in a minute. So I'm just going to select over it with the selection tool and choose Object, Transform, Scale. And again, I want something that is smaller than the previous version and I want a copy. This allows me to already have another duplicate sitting ready to go. And so we're going to look at this path now. I'm just going to click on it. I've just gone into isolation mode, which I didn't want to do, but I'm going to select this path and we're going to do something with it. Now in the original design it just had some dots around it, so let's go to the appearance panel for this shape and let's add our dots. To do that, for a start, I'm going to need a bigger, thicker line. So I'm thinking probably 16 or 17 points is pretty good. And I'm going to click on the stroke option here to open up this panel. I want a round cap and I want a dashed line. To make the circles, the dots, we're going to set the dash to 0, and that makes dots. And then the gap we can make whatever size we like. If the gap is a bit larger than the point size, then the dots are all separated from each other. There's some space between them. If the gap is the point size or smaller, then they start to overlap, touch and then overlap. So I want these dots to be probably a little bit separated. So I'm thinking I'm going to make these 18-point gap for a 17-point line. If you increase your line weight, you want to come back down here and increase your gap weight to suit. So you're looking at what you're getting here. And if I'm happy with that, let's just go back out of isolation mode. I can reshape my heart at this stage if I want to, so I can come back in here and click on this anchor point with the direct selection tool, and I can make the shape a little bit different, so I can pull it into the edges of this heart if I want to. So now we've got the next shape. Let's click on it with the direct selection tool, and this shape had in the original some hollow circles. So let's see how we will create hollow circles. Well, we're going to start again with the appearance panel, and again we're going to wind up this line weight to something fairly thick, and we're going to create our circle. So again, a round cap, dashed line, and we're going to make sure our gap is about the same size as the line weight, if not a little more or a little less, depending on the effect that we're looking for. Well, that's dotted, but it's not a hollow circle. To make it a hollow circle, I need to duplicate this line. So I'm going to take this line here and drop it onto the new button. And then I've got two strokes which are identical. I'm going to come down here, and I'm just going to make this a different color for now. It doesn't matter what color you use, because you're not going to see that later on. And now what I want to do is just start decreasing this stroke weight, because I'm looking at what I'm seeing here, and I'm interested in how thick this black line is, because that ultimately is going to be all I'm going to see. So once I get my black line to be exactly what I want, I'm going to go here for the opacity of this blue stroke, and I'm going to set it to 0. Now what that does is it gives you back just your dots, so you're halfway to what you need here to make those blue areas that we had that are now 0% opacity. To make them see-through, we're going to click here on opacity, and we're going to click on knockout group, because we need that selected. And this is our new appearance. But again, if we don't quite like the heart shape, well, we can come in and alter it, because this heart shape itself is independent of the stroke that's on it, because we can make changes to it, and when we make changes to it, the stroke is going to reform appropriately. So I'm just going to reshape this a little bit until I get the effect that I'm looking for. Here I think I would like my dots to be a bit better, and I might be able to do that by just changing the handle here. So I'm just looking for a good shape. Now for the next heart, on the illustration I showed you in the first place, there was some dashed lines, not dots. This time they're dashes. So let's go and get the shape that we were working with, and I want to go and make a duplicate of it. So with it selected, Object, Transform, Scale, and I want one that's probably about, I'm thinking 70% of the size of the previous one, and I want to copy, because I want both shapes. Now with this one, I just want the default stroke. So with it selected, I'm just going to press the letter D, and that gives me a white fill, black stroke. Don't want any fill, so I'm just going to deselect that. Let's go to the appearance panel for this particular shape, and let's go and make our dashed line. And we do that by increasing the stroke weight again. We want this to be sort of the size of our dashes. And I'm going to click stroke, and I'm going to go for a dashed line. But this time I don't want a circle top. You can see that we're just getting the beginnings of dashes appearing here. Well, we can get more dashes if we increase the dash value here. And here the dash value is the size of this bar, and the gap value is the size of the space. So if you want less of a space, bring down the value of the gap. And if you want a bigger bar or a smaller bar, you're going to change the dash size. And the point size is going to be the thickness. So you can make it deeper or narrower according to whatever point size you use. Now I'm going to use this value, so I'm just going to put the appearance panel out of the way for a minute while I just go and reshape my heart a little bit. If you find that things start moving, you can always go to the layers panel. Here's my layers panel here, and you'll see that these are the hearts that you've been building up so far, and you can lock those down. So if you lock them down, they won't move, so that the only thing that will move is the actual heart shape that you're working on at the moment. Sometimes that just makes life a little bit easier. Now for this shape here, I want it to have border lines around it. So I want the dashes, but I also want some thick borders. So I'm going to again target the shape, and I'm going back to my appearance panel. I want to add another stroke, so I can do that by clicking Add New Stroke. Now the new stroke comes in exactly the same specifications as the old one, so I need to turn some of this off. First of all, I don't want it to be a dashed line, and secondly, I want it to be really quite narrow. So I'm thinking 4 or 5 points. Now you can see the line now in position. We've still got our dash line, but we've got a second stroke. The problem with the second stroke is that it's on the middle of this shape and we want it on the outside edge. Well, we can do that. I'm going to select the stroke that we want to affect, and again go Effect, Path, Offset Path. Going to turn on preview because I need to see what's happening here, and I'm just going to start increasing this value, and it needs to be for me about 13 points. So I'll do that and click OK. And I want a similar line this time on the inside of this shape. So again, I'm going to the appearance panel, but this time let's just copy the previous stroke. So I'm just going to select this one and just drag and drop it onto the new button here, and that gives me a duplicate of this stroke. Now they're both on top of each other. I just want to move this one inside, so I can double click the effect that is applied to this stroke to make changes to it. This opens the offset path dialog again. I'm going to turn on preview, and for this one I'm going to start moving it in. You see that we've still got our previous stroke on the outside, but we've got another stroke on the inside, so we're creating this sort of dashed line effect. I'll click OK. And this is the shape that we have so far. And again, if we want to alter it, we can do so. We can just come in here and reshape it a little bit. As we reshape it, we're going to have a different effect on these joins, and we can just determine exactly how much reshaping we want and exactly how the join is going to look. Now for me, I want one more shape in the middle, so I'm going to select this heart shape, the last one that we used. I'm going to duplicate. Object, Transform, Scale. I want it to be about 70%. That's perfectly right. I'm just going to click Copy because I want a second version of it. I don't want to lose the one I've previously created, because this one that I've just made is going to look completely different. I'm going to press the letter D to set it back to the default settings, because I don't want it to have anything more than just a fill and a stroke, but I do want to reshape it at this point. So again, I'm going to come in here with the direct selection tool and just reshape this. This is going to be the final heart, so this is the very middle of the shape, and it's going to have a pattern in it, and we're going to use a pattern that is actually shipped with Illustrator. So this is a pretty easy one to create. I just want to get a nice shape for it. Now it's got a 1 point stroke around it. I want this stroke to be quite a bit bigger, so I'm coming in here and I'm going to give it a 7 point stroke just in the appearance panel. And you can see that the fill right now is this white solid fill, but we want it to be a pattern. So I'm going to drop open the fill dialog, and then I'm going to click here because I want to go and get a pattern from Illustrator's pattern swatches. I'm going to click Open Swatch Library, Patterns. I'm going for Basic Graphics and then Graphic Lines. Here are the graphic lines. They've just appeared on my other screen, so I'll just bring them back into position, but I'm just going to step you through that again just in case you didn't get it. You're going to open up this dialog. You're going to click here on this menu. You're going to choose Open Swatch Library. You want the pattern swatches. You want Basic Graphics, Graphic Lines, because in this Graphics Lines panel is a series of lines that you can use which are just patterns built into Illustrator. And I'm just going to choose here the 10 LPI. I'm actually going to use 10 LPI 70 because that seems to work really well for this shape. And basically that's the shape that we came here to create. We did it by creating a pattern brush of dots, and then we created this pattern of sort of M shapes that we could apply around the outside of our shape as a pattern brush. And then we created some interesting strokes in using the appearance panel in Illustrator, and finally filled the middle of the shape with a pattern. I'm Helen Bradley. Thank you for joining me for this video tutorial. Look out for more video tutorials here on my YouTube channel, and consider subscribing to my channel and you'll be alerted when new videos are released. And visit my website at projectwoman.com, where you'll find more tips, tricks and tutorials on a range of applications including Photoshop, Lightroom, Illustrator and a whole lot more.